Was this an expected reaction, and how does IATA react to their reaction?
No, I was shocked when they reacted the way they did. It was a great surprise that they were trying to tell us that we were wrong. It was...
You're listening to Dots, Lines, and Destinations, a travel podcast with hosts Stephen Seagraves, Fosma Moon, and Seth Miller.
Hello, and welcome to episode 354 of Dots, Lines, and Destinations, coming to you live from Boston, the Pac Plaza Hotel. It is the IATA Annual General Meeting this week, and obviously this is Seth leading the conversation. I'm joined by, once again, Danny Lee from Hong Kong. He has, I think last time we figured this out, I think it was almost exactly 2 years ago as I was passing through Hong Kong on one of the Cathay First Mistake Fairs. So when we got to hang out, which was amazing, but also had you on the podcast. So welcome to the show.
Yes, thank you very much for having me. It's been too long.
Welcome to the United States. Welcome back to travel. It's a little weird, huh?
Everything feels very strange, especially when you're living in a zero COVID city, and God.
And then coming to the United States?
Yes. Traveling it feels very weird. 565 days without travel and packing just one bag full of masks, shields, other things to keep me safe during travel. So that's one of the real big things of travel that I've had to get used to. Yeah. And a lot of disinfectant.
And not to say that, that was a terrible choice and why did you do that, but, somewhere along the line, I feel like we've sort of learned a little bit, the disinfectant. Smart thing to do. Keep your hands clean, don't touch your eyes, all that other stuff, and perhaps COVID has forced that issue. But we know it's probably not surface transmissible now, right? It's an airborne. And so and which is not to poke at you necessarily, but we're at a conference and there's a lot of hand sanitizers around, but no one ensuring mask compliance, even though it's a city of Boston rule. So there's some weird things that even still, people are like, well, we didn't know, but now we know, and we're still seem to be sort of be doing it wrong in some ways.
Yeah, lots of things I've seen over this IATA conference kind of screws with my mind. Sitting with many people who are not wearing a mask.
Yeah.
Seeing lots of hand sanitizer and very few people using it. I mean, even when I take disinfectant and hand sanitizer around, I kind of feel self-conscious when I'm traveling because I don't want to give the impression to the flight attendants if I'm on a plane that they haven't cleaned their planes nearly as enough as I think. I just feel it's for my own safety that I want to wipe down all the surfaces. I want to be in Naomi Campbell and get everything sparklingly clean. So, yeah, I just feel like...
I'm going to say there's multiple reasons you want to be the Naomi Campbell, but anyways.
Probably. I'm probably as much as a drama queen. But I just feel, for me, having lived in Hong Kong where we know masks work, I just feel happy to have it on. And as long as my interviewees, my guests, anyone in IATA is happy to have me wearing a mask and they can understand me as I'm doing my business and doing my interviews, then that's fine. But I can't control if people are not going to wear a mask or not. I just keep a fair, safe distance.
Yeah.
Not from you, of course.
Oh, and, I'm not perfect by any stretch either, but, it is an interesting, but that I think is, and that sort of goes to the what's it like to be back in travel. I mean, you said you're 560 days, 580 days, something like that?
565.
565 days, and this was your trip back.
Yeah, I'm such a loser for counting.
And, I knew my number when it was finally over, but that was a work trip last year. So, it was easy to calculate, right? You put in Google, days since, March 10th or days since whatever, and it tells you. But, I hope you weren't scratching it and your prison while on the headboard or something, keeping track. But.
Well, it was also quite stressful. So I was not necessarily looking forward to it because the amount of stuff you're trying to pack and you're thinking, have I done enough of this? Have I got enough of that? Have I got enough underpants? Because, and also, the luggage weight that you can take, the luggage allowance you can take hasn't really changed fundamentally.
Right.
And I have to go back to Hong Kong to do 21 days quarantine. So everything I have to think about, how much I need for 21 days as well, where you can't really, you can wash your own clothes in a hotel bathroom sink, but that's very unappealing. You can't get it laundered in the hotel. So you're taking so many supplies for 21 days.
I hadn't considered that part. You're literally, it's what you need to bring 3 weeks worth of whatever in your suitcase for when you show up.
And all the extras for what you need when you're actually traveling. So I've taken 40 odd kilos of stuff just for what effectively is 7 weeks of travel. So it's a lot of things and being in multiple places. But yeah, you throw the kitchen sink and more at it just to make sure that you're okay.
So I'm gonna make a little less fun of you for having packed a 23-inch monitor now, knowing that you're stuck in a hotel room for 3 weeks after you get back, and that maybe it's going to be useful to you there.
Oh, absolutely. So yes, I did take an extra computer monitor with me because not just I like big curvy screens. I need to work, and a small laptop just doesn't cut it for me these days.
Yeah, you were the envy of the IATA media room reporter community, certainly with that.
It's also like a shield from certain people.
Let's talk about the travel experience that you had coming here. My travel experience coming to Boston was very different than yours. I sat on a train for an hour and pulled into North Station. You had to fly, or got to fly, depending on how you look at it. It was a connecting trip through Seoul.
Yes.
Right?
I mean, your green credentials are far better than mine, to say for the start.
For this,
But having tried a new airline long haul for the first time, going for a new airport terminal, it was lovely and weird and strange to be arriving at 5 a.m. And yes, you expect to be quite quiet at that time, but there's just really no one. So I'm just meandering around Incheon Terminal 2, which is the new home of Korean Air, and
it's gorgeous.
It's gorgeous, but also dead.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, the last time I was there would have been 2 years ago at IATA, actually. They hosted it in Seoul.
That terminal had just opened up then.
Yeah.
And I was taken aback at just how beautiful and how lovely and how so many things are here, and all the landscaping, everything they've done inside. It's just like, wow. But then you barely see another person 150 meters down the way, and it's a big terminal as well.
Sure.
So
it was designed to handle like 380s and
Yeah.
lots of passengers at a time. I mean, were your flights empty or full?
about 20-25% load factor.
Okay.
So it was quite, business class was virtually full, and then economy barely filled on, particularly on both legs going from Hong Kong to Incheon and Incheon on to Boston. So pretty similar on both legs. It's just very few people.
Yeah. I mean, and I guess that also sort of speaks to who is traveling now, especially between the U.S. and North America and Asia, which is it's business travel only, which in some ways, which is sort of ironic because we're hearing about how business travel hasn't recovered yet for the most part. It's mostly leisure travel, but in the markets that are more closed, it's the people that truly have to, not the people that are just like, looking for a vacation.
Yeah, I really wish I asked these people.
And they could have been leisure travelers just wanted space in a bed.
Yeah, and there are still going to be even students. And
sure.
But then even looking at the people at the boarding gate, mostly Korean, there are a few foreigners as well. So it's still, again, people still have to try and connect through whatever means possible. And thankfully, the likes of Korean still offer a decent amount of services into the US, so in and out. And so, yeah, I mean, Korea wouldn't have been my first choice initially because you go with what's easiest. But when your options close,
right,
especially when you're trying to get an important conference, you have to look at your options much wider. So it's been, traveling hasn't been easy in the restart. I hope it gets easier, but having to religiously comply with COVID tests and other forms of compliance is tough.
I mean, we talked about that just this morning, where you're trying to connect through the UK, but still need a COVID test as though you're going to the UK, and how unclear that is from the processes.
I wasn't aware until you corrected me, so
You're
thank
welcome.
God. Otherwise, I'd have been denied boarding at Boston, and that would have been embarrassing and upsetting.
Yeah. But that just goes to the point of how confusing some of the requirements are and where to find them and just how to search for them is challenging.
Yes. And I know that there are some apps which do a one-stop shop, but for all kinds of scenarios, there's no perfect answer.
I think there's a one-ish stop shop, so to speak, right? They're good at, when they get it right, they're perfect, but it's hard to know.
And when you're thinking about nationality, when you think about where you've been vaccinated as well, that's now the biggest difference, where it's not so clear and who gets recognition and eligibility. So it's a nightmare.
And I've actually overheard a conversation here of someone saying that they had, I think, one Moderna and one AstraZeneca. It was a mixed blend, but they're double jabbed, but it's a mixed blend, and some countries count that and some countries don't.
Right.
And so do they get to call themselves fully vaccinated or not? And if you're using an app that says, are you fully vaccinated? What would you check there? I don't know.
And even the UK, for example, they go the whole hog and say if you've been a lab rat, so to speak, on certain vaccines, and if you've been jabbed here or there, you can be eligible for all sorts of exemptions.
Yeah.
Except Hong Kong, which I'm very bitter about.
Well, not a colony anymore, so the rules have changed.
Yes, so travel is not easy at the moment, especially with a Hong Kong vaccine. I could go to Europe, fine, but just not the UK.
Yeah. Good luck with that. I want to talk a little bit about Cathay, sort of your bread and butter, as it were. And my experience with it and covering it is much more limited, mostly based on mistake fares. And you sort of live and breathe it every day. Are they going to survive? Is that a fair question?
Oh, they'll be fine.
Okay.
I mean, you look at its cash balance, its cash reserves at the moment. I think, if I recall, they're sitting on about 31 billion Hong Kong dollars worth of cash at the moment. The good news is they've got their cash burn down to around 1 billion a month. Okay. So, in theory, they've got 31 months of reserves, and that's before you consider all the cash that's coming in from cargo operations, which they are one of the biggest air cargo carriers and one of the top 5 in the world. So yeah, they are doing their very best to survive. They've cut back on a lot of things. I mean, specifically on costs. So they've got a much lower cost base. Yeah. The future is still very uncertain because...
So what happens when you close like all of your lounges at Hong Kong Airport? Almost all of your lounges?
Well, no, they've still got a few. It's a few, and the better ones at that. I think it's just more where they restructure the employee costs. That's a substantial amount. And I mean, I'm just trying to think off the top of my head, and they would have sought discounts from suppliers, the whole playbook of how to try and save money during a crisis. But then the bigger problem still is when there's passenger travel return for Cathay, which is difficult when the borders are still in Hong Kong firmly shut, and there seems to be very little desire for Cathay to restart what is part of their bread and butter is the hub operation, and have flights still here and there from all parts of the world feeding into Hong Kong, and people just pass through in transit. That's not happening for them, because if they can't cover the cost of their passenger flights, because they're flying empty and cargo is only going in certain directions, there's obviously no point flying. So yeah, their passenger operations is minimal.
Yeah. And one of the things in the cost savings, they've closed so many of their foreign crew bases, right? Pilot bases have come down.
They had operations of crew bases out of North America, New Zealand, Australia, Germany, London. So all these, particularly the pilot bases in these countries I mentioned.
Yeah. Done.
All pretty much gone. The only outstanding one that remains is for pilots is the US bases, which is going to be reviewed in a not too distant future this year. But given the trend, is almost certainly likely to close. Yeah. And we have seen with the cabin crew bases in the US and Canada, which were closed around the time of the pandemic and just before that started, in fact. So they've done a lot of work to refocus everything in terms of their crew resources on Hong Kong. So there've been decent savings there, but also the fact that when you still look at the cost of jobs, of talented, skilled labor that's had to go not just outside Hong Kong, but in Hong Kong, particularly when we saw the closure of Cathay Dragon in October 2020. That was pretty brutal.
Yeah. And, you mentioned what happens when they try to resume some of the services if those crew bases close. Obviously, you base all your pilots out of Hong Kong instead, but there's some challenges there in terms of the sort of, obviously there's operating costs versus, in-plane operating costs versus what does it take to maintain a base of people outside of home?
I mean, because traditionally, to have a base outside of Hong Kong, it is cheaper to have them employed outside of Hong Kong for certain flights and certain routes, certain times of day that they will fly. I think given the short to medium term, the lack of any consistent schedule, there's no point in the airline's view to have these foreign bases, and you just will bear with the extra cost, but you gain in simplicity overall over time.
That's fair. As the passenger service returns, and we talked about this sort of a little bit, do you think Cathay goes back to its full premium sort of experience? Does the industry go back to that level of first class, premium carriers and things like that? But does Cathay try to stay in that space?
Oh, I think absolutely. Cathay will always remain premium. That will never change. And many airlines seem to be firm in that they are going to defend their premiumness. Tim Clark was listening to him this morning over breakfast, and he was adamant that airlines will look to defend that space, but still the be-all and end-all is to make sure that they stop the cash burn, return to profitability, and keep all the things that make that airline great there, because that's what customers will expect when travel resumes in a big way. And Emirates by far is ahead of the game in not really changing anything fundamentally, looking to restart or get back to full network strength by the middle of next year in 2022. So they are really being aggressive and perhaps bullish that they think that everything will get back to normal, and we would have all forgotten about the virus.
I think Clark said on the CEO panel here at the AGM, I think he was the most bullish on return of business travel, if I remember correctly, of the 5 CEOs that had up there. He said next year, which would be 2022, he expects to see, I don't think it's...
Except for Asia. Probably.
Right, yeah. But Scott Kirby said, except for Asia.
Yeah.
Clark seems to think that like there'll be enough, and I don't know if it was passengers, if it was revenue, if it was if it was revenue miles, which metric he's using, but he seemed pretty keen that business travel is coming back. And I think there's some discussion about, is it going to shift, right? Is it going to be less between the U.S. and, South Asia, or less between the U.S., other different markets, but, trying to sort that out, and figure out which direction things are going. So definitely, some interesting discussion there.
Yeah, I think just the general optimism, airline CEOs seeing the data.
Yeah.
I don't disbelieve them. They can see more than what we can see. But then everyone likes to talk up a good game.
Sure. They've got all, if you tell people business travel has recovered, then the people who are on the fence are like, well, my competitors must be out traveling, so I better get out there too.
Yeah. But definitely, I think if someone like Emirates who's operating out of the super hub and have got, to be honest, they've not got a lot to lose here, to be honest. And obviously they don't really have a domestic market as such.
Yeah.
So they'll push what they'll need to push. But, at least if Emirates can make things work, hopefully many other airlines can.
Yeah. Well, the other sort of rebound / return to travel that we're hearing more about in the last couple of weeks has been A380s. Singapore Airlines being the exception, which sent two off to be scrapped this week at
Painful.
Shanghai, right? But other than that, there has been British Airways is saying they're bringing some back this year. I think Qatar Airways has said they'll bring back a few this year.
Not by choice.
Well, would you care to elaborate?
Well, I think the well-acknowledged issues that, or at least Qatar Airways thinks with the partially grounded A350 aircraft.
They need the paint problem.
Yes, they need capacity back into the market. So why not bring back the A380s? And at least they're there; they've not been scrapped.
Yeah.
And good timing for BA, British Airways, who were already starting to get some aircraft through their maintenance cycle. Perhaps they got a sense that these are our most expensive assets. We need to get these primed in case of restarting. But the A380 was never going to get away from them. So it's good that to see them, I think 5
is the plan by the end of the year.
A380s, yeah.
The initial routes are Frankfurt and Madrid, I think, sort of.
For crew.
I think it's got to be crew training and familiarization, right? Like, they've got to get everybody retrained and recertified, which is kind of amazing. But then from there, you get, they said in the U.S. it's Dallas, Los Angeles, and Miami. So, warm weather destinations, and really just, high demand destinations, right? You can assume when the border reopens, winter demand from London or via London to Miami or to Los Angeles, those were historically winter A380 markets. So it's not that surprising to see that those are where they're planning to bring them back.
Yes. It's just a big hole out in the east. Yeah. Namely Hong Kong.
Yeah. It's another market that.
Oh, and Singapore.
Yeah. Other markets that used to see those planes quite frequently.
So we should explain that we just were gate crashed by Sam Chui.
Yes. If you guys...
Shouting from afar.
Yes. Hi, Sam. Should have invited him over to talk. He was leaving, though. What else has come up here that you've, with your ear to the ground? What other bits of, fun information have you picked up here at the conference?
Oh, that's a challenging one.
Or nothing, and we can switch just like, dim sum fit recommendations.
No, absolutely. No, I just think I still get the sense when we look at vaccines, the vaccine mandate, it's just still quite surprising to me that airlines either cannot compel their staff or cannot even know that their staff have been vaccinated. So there's an element of trust there that these staff, when they are being asked, can you operate this flight legally, that they are. And I just feel that, it's on a need to know basis, airlines need to know as much information as possible to get the crew safely into the skies. It just amazes me how airlines are like, we are bound by data privacy laws and whatnot.
Yeah, I think KLM, Peter Elbers said that, right? Like, they can't mandate it and they just have to trust that the Dutch law works.
Yeah.
The U.S. carriers are still sorting out what mandates look like. United Kirby is the belle of the ball in so many ways here. People talking about him from that New York Times article and the vaccine mandates. And he got up on stage just like, it was the right thing to do. It was no doubt in our mind. We had to do it. Blah, blah. And, very matter of fact, he sort of tried to play down the importance of it in some ways, but compare that to Southwest Airlines, who's
drag kicking and screaming,
and whose CEO, like the statement they put out in the press release was one thing, but the video of Gary, apparently there's a transcript of a video from Gary Kelly out there now, who's the CEO, talking, and he was pretty pissed to have to do it, like claiming they've been like sort of manipulated and forced and whatever. So and honestly, I can't figure out what the end game is there, what he's trying to prove. But it's a really interesting challenge. And I think what Delta has said, even without a true mandate, they did right. They did the $200 health insurance penalty if you didn't have a vaccination. What they've shown, and they're up above 80-something% vaccinated, I think, of employees now. I think what we've seen with mandates and what Kirby has said also is basically do it. The employees eventually are going to will comply because very, very few of them actually think that at the end of the day are willing to give up their job as a result.
Yeah, I mean, especially in somewhere like America, where I like to think that working in aviation is a good, stable, well-paid job. I mean, apart from the fact that there has been a massive crisis, but also to then find yourself in a new career there. Otherwise, it's that choice. I mean, unfortunately, I think that airlines do have to get tough. Some do legitimately say that there is a data privacy issue and they can't know whether their staff have been vaccinated or not. But ultimately, if people who still go on to be unvaccinated, with the variants of COVID still lurking around, they'll eventually pay the price.
Yeah. And, that's a risk to the business operation at the end of the day. I can understand wanting to protect employee privacy and all these other things potentially, and the choice of it, but at the end of the day, the business decision has to be to operate the airline efficiently, to be able to fly all of our international routes with rapidly changing and uncertain rules.
And without having to have a dual operation of unvaccinated and vaccinated crew.
How do you take the unvaccinated crew for crew scheduling and basically running a second seniority list and second set of routes that they can operate in? Right? Does an international airline like a Delta or United or American have to become a domestic arm and then an international arm, and you have to be vaccinated for any international services? There's a lot of different ways that could go. Yeah. But and obviously the answer right now seems to be it doesn't matter because we're not going to actually see that because they're going to mandate it instead. But
yeah, I really also am interested to see how airlines fall into line on air travelers flying internationally. They can only fly if they've been fully vaccinated. It seems that decision, for the most part, has been taken out of the airline's hands, particularly with the reopening of transatlantic travel. But still, I think this is something where airlines probably, if they're bold enough, they get tough. I like to think there's a financial advantage there.
Yeah, I think that's going to come down to governments forcing it. I'm not as convinced that the airlines are going to do it.
And I've wondered through this conference, do airlines need the political cover in order to make certain, perhaps unpalatable things that really need to be done to be carried out by government? So, for example, the Biden administration taking the flak for forcing vaccine mandates. Yeah. We've seen the difficulty, not just Southwest, but with American Airlines. So it's tough on an incredible scale, but.
But at the same time, Air New Zealand has basically,
and Qantas
have basically, I think, probably mandated, or if not fully mandated, definitely pushed very strongly by their government, have said, no, if you want to travel internationally to or from our country, you will be vaccinated.
Yeah.
And so it'll be interesting to see how many more come along, on that front. What else can we talk about? You know anything about ITA, the new Alitalia?
Not very much. I know that they have a very expensive brand for sale.
No bids yet on 290 million euro. So the price will come down, it seems.
Yep.
What a cluster that is. I will say that it's interesting. They put in a new order, for some aircraft.
Yes, Airbus.
A mix of all Airbus, but a mix of leased and owned, which is interesting. But 220s, 330 Neos, and 350s. So sort of the writing was on the wall when they got rid of the 777s as part of the buying out the old assets of Alitalia. But
also when you have such a small fleet of 777s.
Yeah, it was only 9 of them, I think.
Yeah.
So
it's been through many, many different,
including that one 300 that they picked up from Etihad for no apparent reason.
Yeah, it's just when you see Alitalia in its many guises, and like going to the Met Ball with many different dresses and its transformation every hour.
Yeah.
I mean, it's exciting to see, and also sad to see Alitalia go, and it's going to go away in another 10 days' time or thereabouts. But
and then it will be back in one of its many lives as the new Alitalia.
But you also think of it as like a zombie airline. There are still many zombie airlines who exist, particularly in Asia at the moment.
Yeah.
I'm not going to name them. Don't want to offend anyone, but many airlines for many years have muddled along, and through COVID, I would feel that they didn't. I'm surprised that they're still in existence. But for governments who doesn't really have any other options, it's...
I'll name one, Thai, Malaysia. There are, these are airlines that have been a mishmash of fleet types, Garuda, mismatch of fleet types, mismatch of what's actually going on here, but also to their credit, most of those have been, and they're all government owned or pseudo government owned, right, through an investment arm or something like that. But those governments have often said, yeah, we know that the airline isn't necessarily making money, but we make up the difference on tourism dollars, right? It's enough to, if they can bring in extra tourists, if they can bring in extra hotel nights and, room tax nights and dinner, food tax nights or whatever, that offsets the costs. So I'm not sure that's the smartest way to do it, but that's how the governments look at it.
Yeah, and you can see it, even though Japan is a completely different market to, say, like that of Thailand or Indonesia or Malaysia, but you look at how Japan Airlines rose through the ashes, through government intervention and through supervision in order to be a very profitable business post-bankruptcy and restructuring a decade ago, to be honest. And they were having to go through some painful times, but that allowed All Nippon Airways, its chief rival, to really take a lead on them, and they can coexist.
Yeah, and JAL is now coming back pretty strong.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens, but...
Yeah, we'll see what happens in a post-COVID world. But, you hope for something like Alitalia that, yes, you've got foreign airlines in a very open skies market in Europe snapping at the heels, but you'd hope with a fully reformed cost structure, new aircraft, that they can find their own way in a very competitive market.
Yeah. Well, here's the question: is there a new enough management approach that's going to be competitive or not? Right? They've picked Rome as their base instead of Milan, which historically everybody said business was in Milan. Maybe you need to be focused there, and Alitalia has always focused on Rome instead, because the prestige of Rome. I guess I don't know. That's what the government base, wanted them. But it'll be, like everything, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. But I'm skeptical, right? Like it doesn't look new enough and different enough, other than that they killed off all the old, labor contracts, which will certainly help. Labor was very expensive for them, but as the market tries to recover, can they, fend off the Ryanairs and EasyJets and Wizz Airs for the short and regional stuff, and then also, if Lufthansa doesn't win the partnership contract to partner with them, does Lufthansa say screw it and bring Air Dolomiti back and try to flood the market again? They tried it once, right? There was briefly a Lufthansa Italia sort of operation.
Well, Dolomiti, which is, if your audience doesn't know already, is the Italian thriving regional unit out of Italy. They hold their own very well already. So they're always going to be waiting in the wings. But so is Ryanair, so is EasyJet to an extent, and Vueling to a smaller extent.
Yeah, and Dolomiti mostly does connections onward back to Frankfurt and
this is why Carsten Spohr of Lufthansa says we are the biggest foreign or most successful foreign carrier out of Italy for intercontinental traffic.
And at the same time, Delta is still talking about maybe we still want to try Alitalia as a partner.
The dance of all these suitors coming along down the line. It makes it interesting to see who picks what. Or who ITA pick.
Yeah, I mean, you got to wonder also what level of money people are trying to bring to it, right? Does Delta want to become an equity partner like they did, pre-COVID in so many places? I would imagine no. But you also look at American has become equity partner with 2 airlines in South America recently. There's been some play in that space again.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still in awe of Americans' nimbleness, but at least in Latin America, they were given a wake-up call after LATAM opted out of their relationship to...
forced out by the governments, but yes.
Yeah, and working closer with the likes of Delta now.
So, yeah, interesting. Anything else from the conference here that's piqued your curiosity?
The food.
Not very good.
As reasonable, large portions, not too bad.
Welcome to America.
Yeah, I think just getting used to the fact that we're all back together again in variety of forms, being COVID compliant and not, and it takes a little getting used to after being away from living with COVID or having not experienced a living with COVID environment.
Yeah, actually one other thing I remembered from the event, there was a big push towards net zero emissions by 2050. With zero details on how it's actually going to happen. Are you? Well, am I being too skeptical? Am I being too mean?
Well, don't forget, I think the airline industry is trying to self-regulate itself, set itself its own targets in order to avoid things being done for them.
Sure.
And they have to set out a target, but then it's up to the airlines, as IATA says, it's up to the member airlines, because they cannot have jurisdiction over their member in their member airlines' own countries, as we have seen with China, who legitimately feel that they need to follow the targets of its own country. Don't forget that for China, it's for the airlines, they have such a large fleet that's going to only get bigger.
Yeah.
And they've got still a long way to go in that transition as well, because as they still grow and they still have to find their feet.
Yeah.
So I could understand why but it was again quite eye-opening to see such a large and vocal objection from China on something such as this.
I mean, China similarly objected in, I want to say 2016 around some of the Corsia stuff. So the big difference this time was that then it was a formal objection and they actually like voted no on the, resolution. I think this time they objected, but debatable whether it was purposeful or not. I think China Eastern proposed an amendment.
China Southern proposed the amendment.
Okay. But no one seconded it.
No.
So that it never got considered.
No. But I think the Chinese airlines on this particular topic at this time abstained.
Yeah.
So, and again, they're not against, I think no right-minded airline is against
getting there.
Getting to decarbonization. It's just how they get there and when, more importantly.
Quickly. Yeah. Well, I think the answer is probably not quickly enough, but no matter what, but we'll figure out,
Yeah.
Which is a challenge that the industry spent, and not just this industry, but industry and society has spent too long not reacting, and now we're behind.
Yeah, absolutely.
Terribly. But, alrighty then. Any other parting shots before we go?
Oh, I just hope I might get an upgrade when I fly to London and beyond. If anyone's listening, thanks.
Not sure we have that power here on Dots, Lines, and Destinations, but we'll see what we can do. As always, you can follow us on on Twitter at DotsLines. Feel free to leave a comment or send us a note, or more.smorelines.com. Thank you, as always, to our Patreon subscribers. If you want to join, get occasional additional content and early access to the shows, we're on Patreon. You can find those details on our website and Twitter account as well. Thank you, at Journo Danny Lee?
Journo
Danny Arrow.
Yeah.
I guess, last time you got it wrong, this time I got it wrong.
Yeah, that's true.
Journo Danny Arrow on Twitter. If you want to find Danny Lee and keep track of all the reporting out of Hong Kong, and what's going on in the world of transportation there. And that's all. Take care.